As Republicans try to gerrymander their congressional maps in Texas, Democrats are taking a stand. One of them, Representative Trey Martinez Fischer, is here to discuss. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Trey Martinez Fischer, welcome to Defending Democracy.
Thank you for having me. Such an important message.
Yes, it is very important, and I want to jump right into it. So, you and your colleagues in the Texas legislature have chosen to leave the state of Texas to break quorum. For people who don't know what a quorum is, in order for a legislative body to act, there have to be a certain number of members in attendance. And that without a certain number of members in attendance, essentially the chamber can't conduct business. So we're seeing literally hour by hour the Republicans in the state of Texas lose their collective minds and show them for what they are, which is Trump authoritarian wannabes. You know, there is kind of a escalating competition between the governor, who went to court, the attorney general who criticized the governor for going to court, saying he wants to go to court, and then if that's Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Tweedledumist, the senator from Texas, John Cornyn, has somehow thinks he can involve the FBI in all of this. But from where you sit, can you just start by telling us what the latest is on things? And then I want to talk about the process and kind of like how we got here.
Sure. Well, Marc, thank you for having me. This is a great platform because it's about voting rights. It's about our democracy. It's about waking this country up to recognize this is being robbed right before our eyes, and we have to do something about it. Where we are, we are in the Illinois area. We have been here for some time now. I think today is day 4, and the legislative session ends on August 18th. And so we, despite all the threats that we have, not just from Trump and the FBI and our governor, we had a bomb threat at a place we were staying at just yesterday. We have increased our security. We are here as a guest of Governor Pritzker, and he and his team and have been tremendous in looking out for our safety. So we have sort of, hunkered down and tightened our security, but we are not giving up our ability to talk to people like you and these platforms so they know just, hey, man, how much we're sacrificing for this democracy and how we're all in this together and how we all need to do our part. But as it stands right now, Texas cannot adopt a map unless they have 100 House members on the House floor. And as of today, they are denied that number because of our quorum break.
Okay, so first of all, you're gonna hear me say this over and over again, but I'll do it the first time now. You guys are the heroes of this. I mean, you guys are not just talking about helping save democracy, you are actually doing something to help save democracy, and you're doing it at great personal inconvenience and expense and threats. And so my thanks to you, and the thanks, frankly, of millions of Americans for the bravery and the courage you are displaying. And again, you're going to hear me say this several times, so get used to it. But let's start with kind of the beginning, which is that Republicans gerrymandered the state of Texas in 2021, right? People need to realize that it's not like Republicans in 2021 were like, let's do everything totally fair, totally on the up and up. They engaged in gerrymandering. They've been sued over their illegal maps. Those cases are still pending. My law firm is actually involved in representing plaintiffs in that case. So the Republicans come at this, from my standpoint, with sort of a lot of dirty hands to begin with. These folks had really screwed over Texas voters and particularly minority voters in what they'd done in 2021. But bring us now to, I don't know, a month ago, a week ago, whenever the story begins. When did you get a sense that having done what I called was an obscene gerrymander, they now wanted to do a grotesque gerrymander?
There were 2 big clues, right? But the proper background is, for the listeners and viewers, Texas has never been able to survive a redistricting census since the inception of the Voting Rights Act without either being sued and called to the carpet or being stopped by the Department of Justice. So they're traditionally bad actors, right? So this isn't new. But where we are, about a month ago, I had 2 flags. We had the speaker, the governor, and lieutenant governor all lock arms and say that they were going to give Trump this redistricting do-over. That was flag number one. Flag number two, which maybe was like a week before that, the Department of Justice said, oh, by the way, we're looking at your congressional districts and it looks like you used race when you made these things, so you have to go fix them. And the reason that was a flag, and I know you already know, but for others, is that Senator Joan Huffman and all the Republicans that were in charge of drawing the initial map had already testified under oath, not before just one federal judge, but before 3 federal judges under oath, and said these maps are completely legal and had nothing to do with race. So my first question was, who's lying? Is the senator, is she lying in federal court? And that's a big problem. Or is the Trump DOJ lying? So flag number one, that then the big 3 leaders, all Republicans, said, we're going to do this. And this is all happening while we've had the worst flooding event in our state's history, with over 130 people who had died, many of them children. All of a sudden, that moved to the side, and Republicans proceeded with about 8 public hearings on redistricting and only 1 to deal with the flood. And that's when we knew that the fix was in. And we knew that as this process became a sham, and we can talk about that process at the committee level if you like, but once we knew that that was a sham, we knew that we had to do something. And we're one of only a handful of states that have the right to have a quorum. Some states don't have a quorum requirement. We do. And our founders realized how important it was. So darn it, we started going one by one to each member, gut checking them to say, we need to do this.
Okay, so I think you make a really important point about where their priorities are. Right, their priorities are not helping the citizens of Texas. It's not helping their constituents. They're doing this because they are trying to help Donald Trump and Mike Johnson keep control of Congress in Washington, D.C. Like, none of this is being motivated out of a concern that they have for their constituents at home. They are being driven by Donald Trump. I paid a very, very close attention to the point you made about, is it Huffman? Is that her last name?
Yes.
Her testimony, because it did seem what she had said in unequivocal terms under oath was that essentially they had race turned off. Like, it's not even like they didn't use race predominantly. I think like she basically said, no, we didn't use race basically at all in drawing these maps. And then you had the Department of Justice saying, wait, you used race impermissibly. Have they wiggled out of, like, is that like, have they squared that up, or what is the latest of that? Because that does seem like a big problem for someone in that arena.
Well, I don't think they know how, because even the Attorney General has adopted that position, defended that position in court.
This is Paxton, right?
This is Ken Paxton. I mean, he's defended that position. And during the committee process, as much of a sham as it was, there was an effort to bring the DOJ to come testify as to the contents of the letter, and they didn't want to get within 100 miles of the Texas Capitol, and the lawmakers didn't want to. They took a vote to deny that request. So look, they're running scared, but you're right. They weren't prepared for this. They didn't think that Donald Trump was going to call Greg Abbott and say, "Hey, man, bend the knee. I need 5 seats in Congress." They had no idea, because these are their maps to begin with. So I think they're kind of stuck, and they're trying to figure out a way to get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about the process. So you mentioned you need 100 members of the House present on the floor of the State House. So just assume that me and the audience are not familiar with the Texas legislature. How big is it? Republicans control it, right? What's the state of play for them to get 100 members on the floor?
It's going to require Democrats showing up.
Okay.
I mean, there are 62 Democrats.
Okay. And how big is the chamber overall?
150. So they need a hard 100.
Got it. Okay. And so without Democrats there, they cannot bring this forward. The other thing you mentioned is, I think, a deadline of August 18th. And so can you just talk a little bit about, like, is that when the legislative session ends? Is that, I know Texas has a part-time legislature, right? So you're not in all the time. Like, walk people through like what the calendar here is.
So look, the Texas, founders made the legislature a place for ordinary citizens. The idea is we work for 140 days every 2 years, and then we go back to be citizens. So we had finished our regular 140-day session in June. We
Oh
were all
wow, okay.
home. We're all home living the life of citizens. And for someone like me, I'm making things up with my wife. I'm making up with my kids. Making sure that I still have a law license. That I didn't get disbarred over the last 6 months, and so I'm back at home, and then a special session is called. They can
Okay.
only be called for 30 days, and the governor can call them anytime he wants. The Constitution says only for extraordinary reasons, but I guess bending the knee to Trump must fall in that category. And so we're in the middle of a 30-day session. It should end August 18th, August 19th, and then the governor probably, if history is a guide, could call us back into a second session immediately upon the conclusion of the first. We're still trying to figure that out. I mean, understand this. I mean, this does horrible things to congressional districts across the state. It is worse for people of color, for Latinos, African Americans, and Asian. If you don't know anything about Texas, it is it's minority demography that's growing the state. We have received 6 new congressional seats in Congress in the last 2 cycles. 90% of all that growth is because of a minority, half of it alone Latino. But these seats don't go to Latinos and African Americans. They just get divided and cracked and dispersed all over the state so that people who don't have their interests at heart get elected to Congress and then vote against their interests, like cutting all their care and benefits. And so they get a bad deal. But what no one's talking about, there are a lot of Republicans that are kind of on pins and needles because their districts have changed too. And they're on the whisper like, hey, man, we can't do that. Hey, man, I have a certain religious faith that doesn't do very well in rural communities. I can't have my district go out to the rural parts of the state, and so I wish Republicans would be a little bit more bold and speak out about these ramifications because, it's going to hurt some congressional districts that are occupied by minority lawmakers that are Democrats, but this will likely also hurt Republicans.
Yeah, so I want to highlight what you said. I was involved in the litigation over the 2010 census map, the map drawn by the state of Texas in 2011. And one of the points that we made repeatedly was that Texas, I think at that point, had gained 4 House districts, and it was, I believe, entirely the result of minority population growth, overwhelmingly Latino population growth, but also some African American population growth. And the Republicans, just to put it bluntly, screwed over the minority community. They didn't care a whit about helping Latinos or Black voters at all. In fact, quite to the contrary, the map they drew. Then you get to 2020, and Texas gains, I believe, another 2 districts, and it's kind of like the same thing. And so here we are, that the victims of their process, has been the very communities that they are demonizing, the very communities that they are screwing over in this redistricting process, are the communities that are causing the state to gain additional power in Washington, D.C. So talk a little bit about what this draft map, I don't know if it's called a draft map or what you would call it at this point, this Republican map, does. Because it seems to me all it does is, again, screw over minority voters.
And a couple of things to flag. I mean, I think you're absolutely right with everything you said. I chaired the Latino caucus in 2011. I was in the courtroom somewhere with you, probably sitting
Yeah.
behind you. The minority community creates explosive growth. People don't realize that the largest African American population in the country is in Texas.
That's right.
They get surprised when they hear that, but it's true. Latino numbers through the roof. But again, as hard as you work and as your allies work, you and I both know in Texas, fighting the bad guys on redistricting will take 7 years if it's happening.
At least 7 years. I'm thrilled if we get done in 7 years. With the 2011 case that got filed. I mean, I still occasionally see notices of things in that case. Like Republicans in Texas, they can stall redistricting like nowhere else in America.
And that, yeah, so we get this dynamic growth, we get these benefits. They reset the clock by dispersing these minority communities, and then we grind back, over the course of the decade, and we get close again. The decade comes and they reset the clock. And so this is intentional. This is the business model. The best way I can explain, like when someone says, well, what do you mean minority communities are impacted? I'll give you a great example. There is a congressional district that runs from San Antonio out to West Texas. There's a county, Maverick County. So if you've ever been to Eagle Pass, Texas, it's on the border with Piedras Negras, Mexico. That is 99.9% brown, any day of the week. What these map drawers did to dilute that community and limit their voting strength, they just split the county in half. If you live in one half of the county, you vote for one member of Congress. If you live in the other half of the county, you vote for the other member. That is exactly how you silence a voice. And no matter how hard those folks in Maverick County work to elect somebody, they will never win. So I don't care what your analogy is. If you play sports, what would you play the game if you knew the score was going to be, you were going to be on the losing side, no matter how hard you fought? That's exactly what's going on here. And the technology is ridiculous. Whatever you think you have on your iPhone that's so sophisticated, that's how they're drawing maps with precision technology. And in the courtroom, this stuff has not kept up with the technology that these folks are using to slice and dice and crack and pack communities of color, especially in the state of Texas.
I'm so glad you said that, Representative, because I make this point over and over and over again to people. People say, oh, there's always been gerrymandering. And what I tell them is like, yeah, there was gerrymandering in which like a politician took out a paper map and had a general sense, I like this neighborhood, this county's good for me, this I don't like so much. Like sure, that's always gone on. In 2013, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers North Carolina, said that the Republican Party targeted African Americans with near surgical precision. Okay, this was over a voting law, not a redistricting law, but a voting law. That was 2013. I mean, by the time you get to 2021, the amount of computer power, the amount of software, the quality of the software, and the demographic data that has been collected allows Republicans in state of Texas to do something that like just to even use the same word as what was happening with paper maps, like does not come close to underscoring how targeted, how pernicious they can be with modern technology and a political party that has no political constraint on them. In other words, they have no shame. There's no like political limit to what they are willing to do. So that when they produce the maps like they're producing now, it is light years different than what people think about when they say, oh, there's always been gerrymandering.
Well, and honestly, this is an insult to gerrymander. I mean, this is not gerrymandering. And so when I hear people say they're gerrymandering, gerrymandering is easy. This is hard. And think about it. We were in the courtroom together in 2011 in that challenge. The court itself had to appoint a map drawer from the Texas legislature because they don't have the tools or the technology. And we know some of these remedies, these courts can draw their own maps. So we're going into a courtroom and these judges are in the 1.0 world where they have pen and paper and we're going up against folks that bring their own maps to the legislature. This map that's being considered, that's awful, nobody knows who made it. The Texas
I was going to ask you who drew this map.
Nobody knows. The Texas government didn't draw it.
And we know that for sure.
We get an alibi from all the committee members. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I don't know where it is. We've only seen it one time. They've only presented it once and have taken no public testimony on it. And so, I'm very mindful of what happened in Wisconsin when this was done. And this was a flag for me in 2021. When this was initially done in Wisconsin, that map drawer that created all those districts found himself in Texas, and his law firm all of a sudden had not just a Madison office, they had an Austin office. And so I wouldn't be surprised if folks like that are involved. But with surgical technology, think about all the apps that we have. They know what we buy. They know what we like. They know where we live. They know our credit scores. And they know that when you have a certain score, you have a tendency to vote a certain way. And they're just using that based on race and zip codes and taking people out that they don't want and keeping the ones that they think will vote for them.
Okay, so the one question I always ask members of Congress when I have them on, I've got to ask you. Do your Republican colleagues know that this is wrong? Like what is it like in their heart of it? Like, I'm sure you chat with them, off the floor or just like, do they realize that what they are doing is so deeply immoral, so deeply destructive to democracy? And they just like are afraid, like they feel like they have no choice? Are they don't know, like they're just like all in on it and like they have blinded themselves to it? Like, what is going on in the Republican Party that leads them to think that doing this is okay?
Well, it's kind of like Wizard of Oz. I mean, if you find the one that has a heart, right, you can ask them that, right? There are some folks that are just they're bots. They're going to do what they're told. There's no thinking. The discipline of the Republican Party, you do what they say, or you have a primary.
Okay.
Then there are those that do think for themselves, and they do go home and they have to look their spouses in the eye and talk to their family members. They have to shop on aisle 5 of the grocery store where they run into real people, but they've gotten so used to it. I think that they're now just sort of tone deaf because it's not just voting rights. It's we're going to take away somebody's health care, or we're going to tell you can only love certain people. Like Democrats aren't the only ones that have LGBT partners, right? And all the things they do with the transgender children. Well, that's just not for Democratic transgender children. So they have gotten so used to maybe saying an extra prayer at night or doing something to try to redeem themselves. But if they're not running for reelection, we might get them to rise up
Hmm.
and say, I'm going to vote no, or I'm not going to go, I'm not going to participate. But I think right now that you mentioned, I have an idea, and Donald Trump in the same sentence, it's like, okay, jump, how high? So it's kind of the vibe.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Representative Martinez Fischer in a moment. But in 2020, I started Democracy Docket to cover moments exactly like this when voting rights and free and fair elections are under attack. Republicans are targeting the very thing that we fight for, and the team at Democracy Docket covers every single day. But they need your help. So please support their work by becoming a premium member now at the link above or in the description below. I have to take advantage of your expertise on tea leaf reading in Texas Republican circles. So my reading of this is that Abbott filed the lawsuit prematurely. I mean, I think that we could talk about the merits of lawsuits, which is ridiculous. I mean, this lawsuit that Abbott filed that claims that somehow the seats are vacant is like preposterous. I kept reading. I read it actually when it first came out, and it's like page 1, okay, throat clearing. Page 2, still throat clearing. Page 3, still throat clearing. You get to like page 17, and you finally get to something called legal argument, and then you look at it and you're like, this isn't a legal argument. There's no actual. They don't have any cases to support their proposition. They don't have a textual argument to support their proposition. They just kind of like say, well, like this is what we think should be. So the legal argument that you guys have somehow, forfeited your seats, I think is ridiculous and preposterous and should not be entertained by a court for a moment. But we could talk about that in a minute, but I'm intrigued. So Abbott files his case. And then Ken Paxton comes in and says, "Oh no, Your Honor, don't grant what Governor Abbott wants. Like like he's wrong. It's filed prematurely. Dismiss his lawsuit," which I hate to say I agree with Ken Paxton on anything, but I agree with him on. "I'm going to file my own lawsuit." And then you have Cornyn, who is like, "Have the FBI come find these people," which is a complete non sequitur. Like it's nonsensical. First of all, you guys have not done anything wrong. Number two, there's no criminal anything. Like there's the Speaker of the House has issued some civil thing. Also, like the FBI is not in the business. Like the FBI is not like a law enforcement collection agency for state law enforcement. Like it's like a clown show, these three people. Is this all about the Senate primary and like Abbott wanting to run for president, or like it's sort of the gang that can't shoot straight?
Well, I'm going to reveal my age. I mean, it reminds me of an old episode of Benny Hill, if to be honest with you. Right? There's comedy capers. It's 100% Curry in favor with Trump. Absolutely, all three of them. And then there's also some jousting going on between Paxton and Cornyn as they are facing each other in a primary. Just earlier before all of this action took place, you had John Cornyn criticizing Ken Paxton for not working on this because he was golfing in Scotland at a Trump golf course. And so it was like, hey, man, can you get to work for a change? This is important. And I think that's why, Paxton ended up coming in. So, I love the governor's vigor on this and his enthusiasm, but the jurisdiction really lies with me and the local DA if we're going to do something. So it is 1,000% trying to, be that guy that's going to curry favor with the president. And it just really just shows, that the hell with everybody else. There's 31 million people in Texas, 254 counties, 2 time zones, right? And all they care about is not the commander in chief. They care about the commander in cheat, right? Because he's just cheating his way to steal these maps. And that's all they can. It's like a dog whistle. They're just focused on it.
And I assume that Ted Cruz is nowhere to be found, which, by the way, is like quintessential Ted Cruz. Like, for all we know, he's on vacation in some warm spot right now, which is why we haven't heard from him.
Well, we hit him up for a recommendation for Cancun, but didn't hear back from him, man. We wanted to see if he had any reviews for us, but no, nowhere to be found.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what the Republicans are not doing. You mentioned there were horrific floods in Texas. And you would think that the governor would be very concerned about that and want a special session to deal with that, and not want to, and would want, the thing about floods is floods don't just hurt Democrats or just hurt Republicans, they hurt everyone. And, a responsible governor would say, you know what, now is not a time to put put clearly partisan division in a special session. Let's tackle the problems that are facing Texans. You might think that he'd be concerned that Congress just passed a bill that is going to strip healthcare from millions and millions of Americans, including lots and lots of Texans. I'm sure you could list 5 other things that Texas needs addressed right now instead of this. So talk a little bit about what Republicans are not doing when instead they're focused on a power grab.
So in a special session, the governor sets the agenda. Doesn't write the policy. We write the policy, but he sets the terms. On the issue of the flood, you raise a really good point. There might be some things that require legislation. If we're going to require how you communicate and we're going to realign our emergency systems, well, that maybe takes some policy. That's going to take time. But most of the problem is funding. These local communities cannot get the funding they need to buy the expensive equipment that's going to tell you, hey, we have a flood coming, get out of here. 2 years ago, the governor wanted to build a wall and had no money. And using his authority as governor, he zeroed out the entire Texas Department of Criminal Justice prison budget, diverted billions of dollars to build the wall, and then he backfilled it with Joe Biden ARPA dollars, federal dollars, to go back and do the prison mission. The governor today, without us, could move every dollar he wants to fix these problems. So we don't even need to be in session. It really shows how callous he is, because we all know this. I'm a budget guy. I'm a tax guy. We all know the mechanism. And if he really wanted to look good and make us look bad, he could have fixed the floods all by himself in our absence. But something tells me he doesn't want to do it. And by the way, even though a flood will impact anybody, no matter what your political stripe is, those counties are pretty red counties. You would think that he'd want to take care of his counties that vote and support his politics. So not doing any of that, either by the regular means or using his budget execution authority, that's a big flag. He vetoed a proposal that dealt with human trafficking. We're all concerned about human trafficking. These are usually, children, women who have been beaten, forced into sex rings and prostitution, and said, I'm going to veto this proposal because it's just not quite right, and we're going to fix it in a special. Crickets, nothing on that. Committees can meet right now, even though we're not in session. You can't pass anything, but you can do the homework. So whether it's floods, whether it's human trafficking, there's a proposal in there dealing with THC. There are people who are concerned about that. They can have all the committee work in the world done, and then when we come back, we can take the votes have the debate and take the votes. But they're not doing any of that, and that's what should wake people up, because it's not about the floods or anything else. It's just about pleasing Donald Trump.
So you mentioned that Texas is a part-time legislature by design. It's a citizen legislature. You only meet every other year for a limited period of time. You also don't get paid very much. I think it's what, $7,200 a year.
Yeah, you make that sound like a lot. Why don't we start with $600 a month? Let's go with that
Six hundred
number.
dollars a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys are obviously not doing this for the money. You're doing it because you're patriots. You're doing it because you love your country. You love your state. You care about the people of the state of Texas, and that's why you're in the legislature. I am sure that for you and for the other Democrats, having to be out of state is a real burden. It's a burden on your families. It's a burden on your employment. It's a burden psychologically, even before you get to all the threats and all the crazy people. Just like the you know, you in some sense didn't sign up for this, and yet you're doing it. Talk a little bit about what it means for your lives, for your families, and for your ability to live, as you say, as citizens when you're not in session.
I really want to thank you for asking that question. People sort of overlook that part. They think that we're all independently wealthy or make a big salary and we make $600 a month. There is a rule that says for every day I'm gone without permission, I will pay a $500 fine.
Hmm.
So 1 month's salary will be gone in the first day, and so it is difficult. And I'll use a legal term of art. I mean, it's about docket management for me. I know when I'm gone for 6 months, I move my cases around and get them to a place where they can hold. And then in June, I'll just work as crazy as I can to catch up. Well, I can't do that now. So I can't show you, but the box that's sitting this underneath this laptop is the box to my printer that I bought because I have to work while I'm in this hotel room. And so we're citizens. Most of the people that I'm with, they sign the back of the check. They don't have their own business. They depend on someone else for their livelihood. And imagine being gone for 6 months, showing up for a month, and then saying you got to go again, and you have no idea when you're going to come back. It's hard for them. We have some folks that are single parents.
Mm,
They're and these single parents are here with their children.
mm.
Imagine how hard that is. I mean, when's the last time you stayed in a hotel room? They're not very big, and think about being there for a long time with your child. It is a toll. I have teenage children. I have a wife who's a working lawyer who has to manage some very serious docket issues on her watch, and just trying to make it all work. And then not to, I always got to look over my shoulder because I'm worried that somebody's going to nab me, either a law enforcement official or some vigilante that thinks it'll be pretty cool to grab a state rep because Greg Abbott and Kim Paxton said to get them. So it's not easy, but we're doing this. If we're the tip of the spear, I mean, I've been saying on this entire quorum break, the Apollo 13 mission where we had the magic line, Houston, we have a problem. I keep saying, America, we have a problem. We have a problem, and we need to wake up and we need to rise up because this democracy is being taken right in front of us. The idea of them doing this in Texas in the middle of the decade it should shock everybody. And we can't take a day off because we think Governor Newsom is going to create some extra seats in California to offset these gains. We can't take that day off because we know Florida just assembled a redistricting committee today. We know that Missouri is thinking about it. We know that Mike Pence was in Indiana today to look for
JD
more.
Vance. JD Vance.
JD Vance. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay.
JD Vance to go find new seats in Congress. So we have our work cut out for us. And frankly, Marc, I hope we can catch enough stuff for the record because when our job is over, we hand the baton to you, and you're going to be the one asserting the causes of actions and all of the flags and the flaws and the deviations from process and the violations of rights. And what's left of the Civil Rights Act is still applicable in these fights.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing to what you just said, which is so eloquent, and which, as I said at the beginning, makes you a hero. I mean, the fact is that people will sometimes say to me, Marc, why aren't you afraid? And I say, no, I'm definitely afraid. Like, I'd be an idiot not to be afraid. The question is not whether or not you're afraid. The question is, what do you do? Like, do you let the fear paralyze you? Does it cause you to take a step back or take a step forward? And you've taken a step forward. Like, Of course you're afraid. You'd be a moron not to be afraid. I mean, you'd you're facing, the full power of the state of Texas, controlled by the governor who's a lunatic and the attorney general who's like even more of a lunatic. Like, of course you should be afraid. You mentioned vigilantes, but the fact is you haven't let that fear paralyze you. In fact, you've overcome it and done something incredibly courageous at personal sacrifice, not even the theoretical harm that could come if the fear came to pass, but just already having to be out of state. Like, you are sacrificing every minute of every day that you're there, as your colleagues are. And so you are the hero of this story, however it ends up, whatever it is. Like, if we had, you know, 50% of Democrats around the country willing to be half as courageous as you are, we'd be in a lot better position. That's before you get to the Republicans that I've written off. So I have nothing but complete admiration for you. But I want to add one thing to what you said. Um, yes, we are watching our democracy die. We are watching what Republicans, what DeSantis will do in Florida, what, could go on in Missouri, what could go on in Indiana and elsewhere. But I want to come back to the absolute indignity that the voters of Texas would be forced to bear because Republicans are bending a knee to Donald Trump. I mean, the fact is, even if Gavin Newsom could offset it, even if Kathy Hochul could offset it, even if, whatever, it could somehow shake out in the wash at the national level. If you are a citizen of Texas, if you're one of those Latinos who has already suffered the injustice, the indignity, the absolute deprivation of your federal statutory and constitutional rights, like, it's cold comfort that that a governor in another state may offset it. That's great. But what you guys are doing is you're not just standing up for democracy on a nationwide level. You are doing the right thing for the citizens of your state, and to watch your governor and your attorney general and the speaker of the House and the leader of the state Senate not give a shit about what it means for their constituents. I think that speaks volumes, not just to your character, which I can't say enough kind things about, but to the absolute depravity that Greg Abbott would sacrifice his constituents, people who he represents, he would sacrifice them to do the bidding of Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, well, thank you, kind, but yeah, we're in some tough times, and I'm kind of the old school guy that people are going to treat you the way you let them, and we're not going to let people run us over. And we're going to fight back, and we're going to give it everything we have, and that's what we're doing on this quorum break.
Okay, so let me ask you about uh, sort of how people can help, right? Because the biggest question I get, and I am sure that once this video poses, if you look at the comments, like 95% of the comments are going to be, I feel powerless. I feel like there's nothing I can do to help. My God, what Representative Fischer is doing is so brave. What the Texas Democrats are doing is so important. But I'm sure you know this from talking to your own constituents. Like, people feel powerless. They feel like there is nothing they can do, that Donald Trump is doing all these things as Republicans, run the state of Texas, and there's nothing they can do. So how can people help you? How can they help the cause? How can they help themselves? Like, what is your message to people inside Texas and around the country, who care about democracy? What can they do to make this turn out better, understanding it is a bad situation? How can they help make it a little better?
Well, we definitely want people to think about us when they're asking, for blessings and forgiveness at night, and when they pray. Support us, and make sure that we stay strong. Make sure that our families are being looked after. With the men and women up here, it's obviously, you could be with your best friend, but even being with your best friend for 10, 15, 20 days, it's tough. It's a grind, emotionally and otherwise. I for those that are in a position to chip in the value of a cup of coffee they get at Starbucks, I'd love to know that they could do that. We have a platform called onetexas.org that doesn't go to pay any consultants or anything like that. That comes straight for member money to help members get this done. Onetexas.org. And then there are a number of other well-intended groups that are also doing this. And so, just if you're doing something to help Texas Democrats, I think you're doing your part. If you want to help them directly, One Texas is definitely a great place.
We're gonna put a link. People who watch my podcast know I almost never do solicitations in these, but I'm making an exception here. I made an exception in North Carolina for Allison Riggs when they were trying to steal the state Supreme Court seat. I made an exception there, and don't apologize. I wanted you to give it because my point is I want everyone who's watching this. I don't ask you guys to give. I don't ask you guys to support Democratic candidates. That's up to you. But I'm asking you this time to make an exception. As he said, this money will not go to pay consultants. It's not going to go to television ads. This is going to go to make sure, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Representative, that the men and women who are on the front line of this have the resources necessary to prevent to prevent devastation in their own lives. And
Right. And this will be a very direct way. This will be a very fast way. No bureaucracy,
right.
no red tape. It is.
So we're going to put a link to that in the description of the show notes. We've also put it on the screen. And so please do that. Are there things that, like, is it worth constituents calling Republican representatives? Like, is there any thought that maybe Republicans will back away from this, or are they just like all in and that's the end of the story?
In the old days, I would like to think that you could reason with somebody. I think I would ask every single person, especially if you live in Texas and your next door neighbor doesn't vote or your cousin doesn't vote. The issue with Texas, it's not a Republican state, it's a non-voting state. There are so many people who are registered and not voting, or eligible and not registered. And so if this doesn't really just get at your gall, I don't know what will, but we need to encourage people, to get out there and participate in this process, get better members. You and I both know we're going to fight these districts tooth and nail, but some still may be competitive, and we got to go out and win those.
All right. So look, that's everyone's marching orders. If the representative and his colleagues can sacrifice in the way they have, we can all find a way to do our part as well. I want to say, you have an open platform. Anytime you or any of your colleagues want to be on this podcast or want to write something for Democracy Docket, we are 100% here for you. You just let me know. You let my team know. I cannot say how much admiration I have for you, and what the heroes are. I say this in audiences all the time. People who have seen me on MSNBC or see me on TV or in this format know that I routinely say that when this crisis has passed, and 20 years from now, you said you have teenagers, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, your children and your grandchildren will ask you about this time, and they're not going to ask how you felt. Like, you're going to want to tell them, everybody, you're going to want to tell them how you felt. They're going to ask what you did. Okay. They're going to ask, what did you do? When democracy is at stake, don't tell me how you felt. Don't tell me how you didn't like Donald Trump. Tell me, what did you do about it? What were you willing to risk? What were you willing to sacrifice? Well, guess what? This guy and his colleagues, they were willing to risk a lot. They were willing to risk a lot. And so you will be able to tell your grandchildren, your children, that when democracy is at stake, everything you were willing to do, and that makes you a hero today, and it will make you a hero in the future. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And like I said, you have an open invitation to come back anytime.
Well, thank you, Marc. And let me just say, too, we appreciate all the work that you do, your team, the writers at Democracy Docket. They are on top of it. And so, look, we're in this together, and I'll make a deal with you. If you don't quit, I'm not going to quit, right? We're going to do this together. We're going to have to change this. I have hope for the future, and I get my audacity because I know my kids can read the paper, and I want them to know that their dad is doing something about it.
Well, and you are, and they should be very proud of you. I know I am, and I know there are millions of Americans right now that are incredibly proud of what you're doing and eternally grateful. So thank you for joining me, and be well.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Defending Democracy. Please make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's newsletters to stay informed on the latest voting rights and democracy news.